This is John Fuller, and in recent weeks, our elected officials have voted in favor of late-term abortion and even infanticide. Now, that's why Focus on the Family is asking you to be a voice for the voiceless, a voice for life. We'd like you to sign our Declaration for Life. It's available online, and then tell others about it and get them to sign it as well. Look on the screen for the link to the Declaration for Life. All right, what we have for you today is a terrific conversation with Dr. Gary Chapman. Every mom and dad will benefit from this discussion about his book, Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Became Parents.
So it's along the way we have to examine, how do I simplify my life? What are some things that I maybe need to drop off for a while here while I'm raising a child?
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping families thrive.
Gary, it's great, as always, to have you here at Focus. Welcome back.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's good to be back.
Gary, let's start with you and Carolyn when you had that first child. Were you ready for it?
You know, Carolyn had agreed or expressed the desire to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I had the thought, okay, that's wonderful. All I have to do is just, make the money and bring home the food. She's
right.
going to be the mother and she'll take care of this baby.
Right.
I had no idea that it was going to change my schedule. I thought, she's going to be home. She doesn't have anything else to do. She just take care of this kid.
People out there,
Moms are bristling right now.
Oh, yeah.
But I got to
know.
confess, I kind of had the same thought, Gary. I still have kids in the home, and that was my impression.
Yeah.
Man, I'll work out there slugging away hard all day, and I'll come back, and of course everything will be in order. Why does that cause such friction? It does. A child arriving in your home changes the dynamic of your household.
Oh, it changes everything.
What are some of those ways that it changes?
Well, when the child was in the womb, you could go to the store, do all these things. It was much easier when the child was in the womb.
She
than
could
when
even
they come
do some
out,
jogging and other stuff.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But, it starts off with the fundamentals. You got to feed this kid, and it comes very regular. And then you got to take it out the other end,
And that's regular, too.
And that's regular, too, I remember after I changed a few diapers, I said to Carolyn, I said, honey, how long do we have to do this? When does the potty training come?
Yeah. Please, quick. I'll tell you, last night, we've got 2 foster kids with us, and one of them's not quite potty trained yet. Last night, at my age, I was changing a duty diaper. And I'm thinking, really, Lord? Really, Lord?
Good training. One day you'll have grandchildren.
Yeah.
You can do
Now,
it,
I'm going to
sure.
tell you, Gene's changed most of them. I'm not going to sound like I'm something special. But it does change, and it puts pressure also on your relationship, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And that's one of the things we discuss in the book is the fact that marriages do not operate on automatic. You've got to do something. And I think the first thing with the marriage is to resolve, both of you, look, we're going to keep our marriage alive. If God allowed us to be married and have children, there's time to do both. We just got to figure it out.
Oh, without a doubt.
How we're going to work it, but we're going to keep our marriage alive.
And you got to work at it. You got to be intentional. I would say that I'm not as intentional as I should be, and have, with our boys when they were younger, I was not as good. There's someone on staff here at Focus that really, John and Shelley Bethany, they would always carve out 15, 20 minutes when he would get home, and he would say to the kids, go do something, because this is mommy and daddy's time.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maintain that conversation. It's not just, can you get the dishes done? Can you get the diapers cleared out? It can't revolve around the children.
Yeah, one of the things we did, of course, in the early days with sleep, it's going to depend on the baby. Some babies sleep all night long. Our daughter slept 18 hours, I think, in the early days,
Are you kidding me?
But our son, he thought sleep was a waste of time, He was awake all night long. Children are different, and that's one of the issues that we discuss. Children are different. You can't expect them to be the same. But once they get a little older and they get on the schedule, we put our children to bed early, 7 o'clock.
That
bedtime,
is early.
Bedtime,
Yeah. That was selfish, I think, right?
Yeah, and when they got to be 6, We moved it back 5 minutes, 7:05, and we moved it back 5 minutes right on up till they were 12. So 7:35, at 12, they're going to bed.
Yeah.
So, that gives time. If you get the children to bed early, it gives you time to have time together with each other, and that's important.
I was dumb enough to move that in like half-hour increments or hour increments getting older. Why didn't I think in 5-minute incrents?
And now they're teens, and they don't start to talk.
10 o'clock?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's crazy. What about modeling that relationship? So often, Gary, we forget how we project to our children as we interact as husband and wife. Communicates a lot to the kids. It communicates stability or instability, fear or contentment, and safety. Speak to that. How to be mindful of that, even when you're not feeling it toward your spouse.
Yeah. I think the interaction between the husband and the wife are extremely important to the development of the child. I mean, you are their primary model. And if the child hears the dad yelling and screaming at the mother, or the mother doing the same toward him, the equilibrium of that child, the emotional equilibrium, is just off. Something's wrong here. Little children can tell that. So I think we have to learn how to process our differences in maybe a way we haven't already learned. If you haven't learned this before you have the child, it's not going to just happen. You have to learn how to talk rather than yell, how to listen, and how not to interrupt each other, and how to try to understand the other person rather than trying to get your point across, and looking for a solution rather than trying to win the argument. I mean, all of that can be learned. And I would say to parents, if you haven't learned that already, ought to take a class at your church, ought to go see a counselor, ought to read a book, ought to do something to learn how to process life with each other in a healthy way, so you're giving a good model to the child.
Well, that's good encouragement. And of course, people are hearing you as a parent of adult children and as a grandfather, and I know your co-author is still in the midst of kids at home. Were you there at 24, 25, or 30? How did you learn these principles, and what kind of person was Gary Chapman back when you were raising the little ones?
I wasn't there. I knew very, very little about raising children when our first child came, and the second child came 4 years later. But I was open to my wife. And so when she asked me to do things, I was willing to do those things. Mm-hmm. And together we kind of learned the process. And then we asked people questions. Don't try to do this alone. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're struggling with, reach out to your mother, your daddy, reach out to an older couple, reach out to someone that's had a child 3 years older than yours, and ask questions, because we can learn from each other. So I think the openness to learn was there for me, and I did learn as we went along. And we made mistakes, to be sure. But, when I look back on it, I'm so grateful that the kids are grown now, and they're both walking with God, and they're doing good things for God. And
that's the goal.
That's the joy, ultimate joy of raising children. John said that. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth.
Yeah.
He was talking about spiritual children, but I'm talking about our physical children.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff, and that's what's on the heart of every parent.
Yeah.
They want good things for their children that way. Let me move back again to that feeling, because it's important to me to bring that wisdom down to a younger and younger age, like we talked about. I would have loved to have had this conversation with you when I was 30 and trying to figure out my wife still. We'd been married 5 years at that point. But in the book, you talk about organization and some people not being organized. I think for me, that's been one of the things. I tend to like neat and tidy, and when, especially if the spouse is at home and trying to keep things organized, it's overwhelming. I think if you're working outside the home, and I know in today's culture it goes either way, and I get that, but one spouse in the home, one spouse outside the home, you can really let that boil under your skin. You come home and there's all this chaos going on, and you're going, my goodness, you've had 8-9 hours. I mean, you wouldn't say that, but you're thinking it, and it plays through in your communication, maybe nonverbal. Maybe like me, you were stupid enough to say something a few times. But how do you relax as a younger person who hasn't lived a full life yet? What triggers do you use to say, just chill out?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to recognize, first of all, that this is a team effort. We cannot depend on the mother to raise the child. There's a reason why it takes a mother and a father to have a child. And the reason is that they're to be there for that child. That's the ideal.
Yeah.
That's what we hope for. And as a father, I think we have to recognize we don't know what that mother's been through all day long and all the things that she's done. So we have to prepare ourselves that, yes, it may be messy when I get home, and I'm a part of this team. So one of the things I'm going to ask is, honey, how can I help you? What can I do that would be helpful to you?
Yeah.
It's that openness, and she will have ideas on what you can do to help her. But if we see it as a team effort, it's not that she does all the parenting and I do the work outside the home. No. We're doing this together. And the more a husband is open to that and asks his wife on how he can help her, the more likely they are to work together as a team.
Gary, we talked about that situation where there's a spouse that's able to be at home. What about the double income household, which is pretty normal today?
Absolutely,
where you have both parents working and the kids are in daycare. How do they manage those things?
Yeah, I think this is where a lot of other questions arise. If we're going to both work outside the home, then who's going to take care of the children while we're working outside the home? And sometimes that can be extended family. If grandparents are around, sometimes that's workable. If not, it's going to be a preschool at a church or an independent preschool. I think the key thing there is we really want to examine what's going on in that preschool, how it's run, make sure we're getting the best opportunity for our children to be learning while they're away from us. And then I think, obviously, the arrangement of who's going to pick up the child in the afternoon will depend somewhat on what our work schedule is. But one of us is going to pick up the child and go home. And when we get home, however, now it's our responsibility, and we want to work on that together. And let me just throw this out for husbands. I think we're probably going to have to simplify our life. You can't go to the gym 3 days a week and play golf all day Saturday and work, long hours, and then when you're at home, be on the computer all night. You're not going to be able to be a father and do all those things. So it's along the way we have to examine, how do I simplify my life? What are some things that I maybe need to drop off for a while here while I'm raising a child? It's hard, it's sacrificial, but that's what love's all about. Loving a child is sacrifice.
No, I appreciate that. This is the moment of truth, though. Have either of you ever forgotten your child at school? No, you didn't pick them up. This is like a man thing. I don't know why. Come on.
I don't
Gary,
think I
did you
ever
ever
forgot
forget
the
kids?
child.
Yeah, it's my job to drop Zane off at school, and more than once I have driven right past the school
On the pickup side?
no, just dropping him off in the morning, and he'll be in the back seat saying, "Dad, were you gonna take me to school, or am I going to work with you today?" So it can be kind of a fun moment if you smile about it.
Yeah.
Gary, you had 2 children, and I have 2. So you have the first one, and things flow a certain direction, and then number 2 comes along, and it's different. I mean, it's just different. And Jean had a great line one time. She said, "Well, no child's ever born into the same family." And it's true, because you're either the family of 3 or the family of 4. It's never the same family. Yeah. Tell us the differences and how, as parents, we need to relax about these differences, that Johnny and Susie are not going to be the same type of child.
Yeah. Well, that's so true. Our daughter could have raised herself. I mean, she was so compliant, she slept and she did the right things and all. And Carolyn had said earlier she'd like to have 5 boys, and I was in love at the time before we got married, and I said, "Fine, baby, whatever you want." Our second one was a baby, was a boy. The first one was a girl. Second one was a boy. He came along, and it wasn't very long along the journey. Carolyn said, "I think one of each is probably enough." But they were very, very, very different, and they are different as adults. And this is one of the points we make in the book, is that no 2 children are alike. And we tend to compare babies. Even when the baby is born, what do the mothers ask? Now, the guys don't mess with this, but the mothers say, "Now, how much did the baby weigh and how long was the baby?"
Guys don't. Yeah, right.
"Oh, that was a little bit bigger than my baby, or a little bit less." We're already comparing right
how
there.
How tall is he?
Yeah. And it's natural, I think, to compare. And particularly if you have 2 children in the same family, we tend to compare them. But we're going down the wrong road when we do that. Yeah. God made each of us unique, and our children are going to be unique, and we have to relate to them as a person.
How quickly, as a parent, do you need to recognize those differences in your child and even then begin to stay true in the center in terms of your parenting on principles and conviction?
Yeah.
But adapt to the child's personality so that they can connect to what you're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it starts rather early. You begin to see personality differences. For example, even in terms of activity. One child will be much more active. They're just reaching out and touching everything and doing, and another may be content just to sit there. And you wonder, well, was something wrong here?
Yes.
They're not responding like the other child did. So you can see some of these personality differences right along the way. And some are more resistant. Some will push back more than others will push back. So these things begin to emerge. And if we just keep our eyes open and recognize them and don't think that there's something wrong with the child because they're not like the other child, they're being who they are, and we have to learn to relate to them. But they all need basic fundamental principles and teachings and boundaries and all of that.
The core stuff.
Yeah.
But I've seen that in my boys. You have to approach things slightly differently. And it probably took me too long to figure that out as a dad. And I'm sure for moms it's the same as well. You just can't use the same template with each child. And that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
That comparison game, I love... I remember we went to the pediatrician. We had a funny pediatrician. He had more fun with us, just toying with us as parents. So Gene, one of the kids, took a little longer potty training. And so Gene was conveying this to the pediatrician and saying, this one's just not potty training that fast. And he looked at her and said, Gene, I can appreciate your concern, but I don't see many 14-year-olds in here wearing diapers, So he'll figure it out. Don't be overwhelmed by it. And it was a great statement. Yeah. And I think probably that's true mostly moms who are worried because they're seeing their girlfriend's kids are advancing at a different rate. And that's normal that you'll have some variance in early development, right?
Yeah. And then, you'll hear a parent who says that they trained their child to go to the potty in 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
I wouldn't believe that if I were you.
Yes, and we're all taking notes.
But maybe it did happen for them, but it's going to be more like 3 to 5 months for you. So.
And then the one that is not potty training quickly says, but recent research shows that they'll be better readers if they potty train later. I love that. We all come up with
There's a justification, isn't there?
Yeah, there really is.
Well, one of the problems is that we start too early in the potty training thing because we want to get them on the potty. So we try too early, and they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
So you have to wait till they begin to give you some signals that they're ready for it.
Dr. Chapman, do you find that phrase "start too early" characterizes a lot for first-time parents? I mean, for me, that was the case. I think we wanted to. Earlier is better, but it's not always the case, right?
Earlier means smarter,
exactly,
better.
Yeah. I think in all their development, we have to recognize that, this child is developing at a normal rate, and we're going to cooperate with God in the way God made this child. And so, that's the key, is to not to force your idea of what their development ought to be like. It's okay to read development books about what's supposed to happen at certain times and all of that, and that's good, but just don't try to put your child into that mold because they may not be in that mold.
Right, and it's not dangerous. That's the point. You're not losing ground. Gary, in your book, Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Became Parents, you also talk about the importance of emotional health in the lives of our children. I think we all think of those things as parents. I don't know if we exactly know what to do to help them emotionally. Physically, we want them to eat right. We don't want them to eat much or any sugar. That's kind of been the battle for us in the home is, how many chocolate milkshakes do the boys get over a month?
Yeah.
And but you can be, as a new parent, very intent on nutrition and stumbling or bumbling when it comes to emotional nutrition. What does it look like?
Yeah, and I think this is really important, that we tend to think that, emotions just take care of themselves because a lot of us are not in touch with our emotions. But we want that. Let's just start with the thing of empathy. We want that child to learn how to hear the emotions of another person and be able to identify whether it's a negative hurt or whether it's a joy. So how do you do that? Well, one thing is helping the child learn how to identify their own emotions. And this can start rather early. So the parent says to the child, it sounds like you're feeling disappointed because you can't go out and play because it's raining. Disappointed, that's a feeling, okay? So you're identifying a feeling for them.
Rather than just get in here because I told you to.
And a little while later, you'll hear the child say, I'm disappointed. You see, they've now come to recognize that emotion and attach a name to it. So you start early with the child with that sort of thing. And when we do, we're helping that child develop their emotions. The whole thing, anger is an emotion, And so the mother says, sounds to me like you're really angry about that. Well, and then the child will later say, I'm angry about that. So they're identifying their emotions, and they will be able to identify emotions in other people.
Can I throw a landmine into this discussion at this point? When you have the teenagers and you're seeing behavior that is unhealthy, as a parent, how much should you own of that? I mean, we go both directions. We either own it all, or we say, well, you know what? It's just the personality I had. I didn't have much to work with.
Yeah.
But I'm asking that question because I think we undervalue those early years and how we train them in the way that, so if they're expressing anger as a teenager, it's possible that you overdid it when they were little. And we've got to own it.
Yeah. I think there's both sides of that. There's the reality that much of what a teenager does, they learn from us. I remember when our son was yelling and screaming at me, and it dawned on me, I was yelling and screaming at him.
Right.
And that was a big moment for me. And we together had to learn how to work through the whole anger thing. Because many of us as parents have not handled our anger very well. And whether it's been angry expressed to the child in a negative way or expressed to a spouse in a negative way, the child's seen that. They grew up with that. And now they're just parenting what they saw. They're handling their anger the way that we handle our anger. So and at that juncture, then we have to learn together. And that's what I said to my son. Derek, why don't we try to learn when we're angry to sit down and listen rather than yelling at each other. And that was the beginning of a whole new learning experience for both of us.
Maybe that'll be a good place to pick up next time. Gary, this has been a great conversation. I hope for particularly those new parents or the parent-to-be, they found out this is it, or they're planning to have a child. Maybe even your kids are 3, 4, 5 years old. This is still wonderful content for you to apply. And I hope we have met our commitment to give you some thought and allow you to ponder your parenting practices or your future parenting practices in the way it should be done. That's why Focus is here. It's what we're here to do, is equip you to be the best parent you could be.
And by the way, make a generous donation to support the work here of Focus on the Family as we come alongside parents, whatever season you're in of parenting, to help you. If you'll make a generous donation today, we'll send Dr. Chapman's book to you as our way of saying thanks for joining the partnership team.
Gary, as the guru of love languages, what's yours again?
Words of affirmation.
Okay, John, how about you?
Well, the same thing, actually, words of affirmation.
I don't know what I am. Okay, tonight,
touch, Jim.
You and I got to talk about this, and it's not physical touch, and John keeps doing that to me. But we'll figure it out, and next time I'll tell everybody what I think I am.
All right.
Okay, let's do that.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Dr. Chapman. And of course, parenting begins with babies. At the top of the show, I mentioned our efforts to take a stand for life in the culture. That includes our Declaration for Life, which we're asking you to sign, and then to share with friends. Get them to sign it as well. We're going to make a stand for life by delivering that petition to our elected officials in Washington, D.C. We're going to let them know we value life. And then we're going to invite you to join us on May 4th in New York City, Times Square, where we're going to show a 4D ultrasound on the big screens so all can see that's clearly a baby in the womb. Join us on May 4th, details online, and sign that declaration also online. Click the link on your screen for more. Or call 800, the letter A and the word family, 800-232-6459. On behalf of Jim Daly and the entire team, thanks for watching today. I'm John Fuller, inviting you back as we once again help you and your family thrive in Christ.